The Chernobyl explosion and meltdown is by far the worst nuclear disaster that the world has ever experienced. Once investigations were underway, it was announced that reactor number 4 had exploded. However, many details were suppressed about what had happened, and many were told to go in and clean up, not knowing the seriousness of the event. Immediately after the situation, people were evacuated from the area. It's thought that this number is somewhere around 340,000 to 360,000 people. Even to this day, there are restrictions on where you can visit, with most of the areas around Chernobyl being out of bounds. Incredibly, we now know that the event emitted over 400 times more radiation than that released by the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Humans were evacuated from the area, but animals were left behind. Decades later, the exclusion zone is now home to a diverse ecosystem. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the animals that are now living in this remote region. Catfish. A number of videos have been released that show catfish dwelling calmly in the cool waters of a local pond in Chernobyl. A few of these catfish have been observed growing to enormous sizes. Gigantic sizes are not always a positive thing, and this growth rate is almost impossible under normal conditions. This is because of nutrition shortages and consuming enough food to compensate for the energy wasted in moving around. Researchers have noted that excessive growths are a result of artificial mutation. As a matter of fact, mutants are known for having bizarre growth patterns and lacking in other areas. This includes things like not being able to hunt as well as they should. Although a few of these catfish have been found with mutation, researchers announced that there's a large amount of them that are fine. Typically, catfish are usually fairly small. The biggest one ever measured was 160 kilograms. However, the Chernobyl catfish have grown up to 360. In the Chernobyl ponds, the fish live freely, grow comfortably, and feed well enough with no threats from predators. This means they live in a perfect environment so they can reach abnormal sizes. According to Dr. Timothy, a radiation specialist at the University of South Carolina, very few mutations result in extra large sizes. The cooling ponds of Chernobyl offer the giant catfish populations an isolated habitat, free from predators and having a large amount of prey to feast upon. The river monsters show even visited this region in the hopes of catching one of these creatures. It's said that the Chernobyl catfish that was caught by Jeremy Wade was radioactive. In fact, tests were carried out and it showed them that it was more than 16 times above the normal radiation level. The abandoned pets. The 1986 nuclear explosion of Chernobyl turned the place into a wasteland and the city of Ukraine into a ghost town. When the Chernobyl people were vacated, they were advised to leave everything behind, including their pets. At the moment, approximately 900 stray dogs live in and around the nuclear plant in Chernobyl, chased out of the nearby forest by wolves. First-hand accounts written in the Chernobyl prayer book, which contains an oral history of what happened in the explosion, speak of dogs howling as they tried to get into the buses. However, they weren't allowed in, as the soldiers were given strict orders to kick them out if they tried. Soldiers were given instructions to shoot any animals that remained in the exclusion zone, but luckily a number of them managed to run away and survive. Researchers have discovered that they didn't live long, having a lifespan of around 4 years. This is said to be due to the large amount of radiation that they carry in their fur. However, others have said other factors could include malnutrition, disease, and predators. Officials told a worker that they had to go out and hunt down the last of the pets, but he refused to follow these orders. Instead, the Dogs of Chernobyl program and the Clean Future Fund have focused on spraying and vaccinating the dogs remaining in the area. For the last time in 2008, some of the Chernobyl stray dogs were rescued and allowed to be released for adoption. However, before being cleared, the dogs were cleansed of the radioactive dust and examined to ensure they posed no threats to humans. Wolves. Studies have pointed to the possible existence of European grey wolves in the exclusion zone of Chernobyl. Although the area is clear of humans, the animals living there aren't free from the radiation and its effects. In a recent study, 13 wolves were tracked using collars to measure the radiation, and it was concluded that the wolves often travelled through the most contaminated areas. This meant they were often exposed to some of the highest levels of radiation the area had to offer. One of the collared male wolves went 250 miles out of the region. It was tracked home from Belarus to Ukraine and finally into Russia. A wildlife researcher at the University of Georgia said that this was the first recorded long-distance movement of a wolf from the exclusion zone. They've said this isn't strange, since young male wolves commonly travel over long distances while seeking mates. Michael Byrne, an author studying animals movement at the University of Missouri, said that it's known that the population of wolves in the Chernobyl exclusion zone is high and has reached a level where the animals have started dispersing. Biologists at the University of South Carolina said that the studies have shown that the Chernobyl radiation can result in mutations and adverse effects on health. This is likely then to be passed down to the next generation. The effect of the Chernobyl wolves mixing with other animals is still unknown and remains to be seen. Studies have shown that the mutation rates of species in the mutation zones have increased up to 20 times. This, however, does not mean that strange hybrid creatures are roaming Chernobyl. Mutations aren't usually dramatic and can happen even without being exposed to radiation. Rangers noticing an increased genetic abnormality rate in farm animals. The Chernobyl explosion resulted in the highest accidental release of radioactivity in history. The animals inhabiting the area have allowed researchers to study the impact and the possible recovery from the explosion. Several years after the accident, scientists have focused their research on the animals left behind to study the effect of the Chernobyl attack. Rangers noticed a rise in genetic deformities in farm animals soon after the explosion. The number of abnormalities rose again in 1989 and 1990, probably resulting from the radiation coming from the sarcophagus, which was intended for the isolation of the nuclear core. Approximately 400 deformed animals were born in 1990, with some deformities being so severe that the animals couldn't last past a few hours. Some of the noted defects included malformations of the face, abnormal colour, extra appendages, and a smaller than normal size. Mutations in domestic animals were commonly seen in cows and pigs. Exposed cows and those that fed on radioactive feed produced radioactive milk. The reproduction and health of the animals in the area went down for the initial 6 months after the explosion, and after that they bounced back and reclaimed the area. The animals in the area may remain radioactive since they feed on radioactive food and thus produce fewer offspring. Not all life forms have thrived in the exclusion zone. Invertebrates have diminished, probably because they lay eggs in the soil's upper layer, which has high radioactive levels. Aquatic life was also contaminated, facing continued genetic instability. Birds in Chernobyl have also exhibited more abnormalities. These include things like albino feathers, deformed beaks, deformed air sacs, and tail feathers that are bent. They also have lower reproductive success. Another example is that of the insects that can be found in the inclusion zone. They have shorter lifespans and have been shown to have higher genetic differences than before. With that being said, researchers have observed that the creatures of Chernobyl are thriving. Contradicting the general assumptions, Chernobyl has become somewhat of a refuge for wildlife. All of the mentioned wildlife is doing better than ever, with numbers increasing every year. This has caused some to question, is mankind more dangerous to wildlife than radioactivity? Some animals have been seen to be doing much better than others in the zone. For example, stray dogs in Chernobyl rely on people's kindness to survive. The workers in the zone share their meals with the strays roaming the region. The workers are however advised not to touch the animals, since radioactive substances could be passed on to them. Horses are another animal that seem to be thriving in the region. The Mongolian wild horse has been observed getting on great in this region. Zoologists introduced these endangered species into the zone in 1998, and they grew in numbers without human intervention. Strange enough, the population of large animals in the Belarus side of the zone has risen since the explosion. The number of boars, moose, and wolves have increased more than ever before. Despite the existence of the radiation, it's probably not enough to suppress the life forms to the point where they're unable to sustain themselves. It does remain a mystery, however, when humans will be able to return to the exclusion zone. So what do you make of the creatures of Chernobyl, and do you think they're better off without human intervention? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community whilst working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.